Okay, let's unpack this. Picture this. Your little one is hovering near something they absolutely shouldn't touch.
Hmm.
You've given the gentle warnings, maybe even a slightly firmer no, and yet those tiny fingers inch closer to the forbidden fruit. You know, that delicate vase on the shelf.
Oh, I know the scene.
Then the inevitable happens.
Hmm.
Crash. That sudden surge of parental frustration, the feeling of, I told you so, mixed with pure exasperation. It's such a universal parenting moment, isn't it? And let's be honest, it's not pleasant for anyone.
No, that feeling of being completely overwhelmed by what your child just did, that spike of irritation or even, real anger, it's incredibly common for parents. It's exactly in those moments that we often react in ways we regret later.
And that's precisely what we're diving into today. We've got Raising Mindful and Connected Humans by Hunter Clarke-Fields as our source material.
Great book.
Yeah, and our goal is to really understand how we can step out of those automatic reaction cycles and build stronger, more positive connections with our kids. Forget the myth of the perfect parent. Our focus here is on making real, meaningful changes that actually feel doable.
Exactly. This isn't about finding some kind of magic bullet, is it? It's about exploring practical, research-backed strategies, things that can help us as parents better manage our own emotions.
Right.
And in turn, foster healthier, more cooperative relationships with our children for, the long haul.
So what's in store for this deep dive? We're going to be looking at some really tangible techniques for navigating those intense emotions we feel, figuring out what our personal triggers are.
The triggers, crucial.
And connecting with our kids in ways that genuinely encourage cooperation and build that lasting positive relationship.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we want you to walk away feeling less like you're constantly, putting out fires and more equipped.
More equipped, yeah. And at the core of this, as the book explores, is really understanding our own stress response system. Because when those challenging moments pop up, our body's natural fight, flight, or freeze response can just take over. It's driven by the amygdala, kind of a more primal part of our brain.
Right, the alarm system.
Exactly. And when that happens, our prefrontal cortex, that's the part responsible for logical thought, decision-making, it can kind of take a back seat. Yeah. And that's often when we see those impulsive reactions, like yelling, that we later wish we could just, take back.
Right. So the amygdala is like the smoke alarm that goes off even when you just burn the toast.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And the prefrontal cortex is the operator trying to calmly figure out if the house is actually on fire.
That's a really helpful analogy, yeah. And the encouraging news, and the book really stresses this, is that we aren't destined to be stuck in this reactive pattern forever. Mindfulness is presented as a really powerful tool.
Okay.
A way to actually influence this dynamic within our own brains.
Mindfulness. Yeah, that term gets thrown around a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But the book really grounds it in, everyday life.
It does.
It's not about achieving some constant state of Zen or anything. In this context, it's more about intentionally slowing down, bringing your full awareness to the present moment, whatever you're doing. They use a simple example, like washing dishes, really paying attention to your breath, the sound of the water, the physical sensations, and even just noticing any feelings that bubble up while you're doing it.
And what's fascinating here is the actual neurological impact. The book references studies showing that consistent mindfulness practice, and that could be formal meditation, sure, or yoga, but also just those mindful moments during chores.
Like the dishes?
Like the dishes. It can lead to a physical shrinking of the amygdala.
Really?
Yeah, even within about 8 weeks, the research suggests. Now, this doesn't mean those initial feelings just vanish, but it does seem to create more space. More space for the prefrontal cortex to engage before you react. So you might still feel that surge of anger when the vase breaks, but you'll have maybe a fraction more time to choose your response instead of immediately, lashing out.
Wow. So our brains are actually rewiring themselves. That's incredible.
Precisely. And what's even more encouraging is that the connections between that logical prefrontal cortex and other parts of the brain, they actually get stronger. So while mindfulness might seem like a simple concept, maybe even a bit trendy, it really builds a solid foundation for developing better parenting skills and, crucially, for breaking those ingrained patterns of reacting. Patterns that can sometimes get passed down, through generations.
Okay, so the first step is really about tuning into what's happening right now, both inside us and around us. But it's not just about the kids' behavior triggering us, is it? The book puts a big emphasis on us understanding our own stuff.
Oh, absolutely critical. We all have personal triggers, those specific situations or words or behaviors that just tend to spark a strong emotional response in us.
Yeah.
And the book encourages us to really explore the roots of these triggers. It suggests connecting them back to our own experiences growing up. Like, what kind of reactions did you see from your own parents in similar situations? How did those reactions make you feel back then as a child? Sometimes triggers aren't just about the external event, but internal feelings like, I don't know, inadequacy or fear that get projected onto our kids' behavior.
That's insightful. So if maybe you experienced a lot of yelling and criticism as a kid for making mistakes,
Right.
you might be more prone now to overreacting when your own child spills their milk, even though logically you know it's just spilled milk. It's a minor thing.
Exactly. And the book really emphasizes approaching this self-reflection with a sense of um, self-compassion. This isn't about beating ourselves up or feeling guilty or ashamed about having these triggers.
Right.
It's about gaining understanding,
Well,
about tracing the origins of these strong reactions so we can begin to respond to them differently, in the present moment.
so we identify the trigger, we acknowledge the feeling it brings up,
Mhm.
and then how do we actually stop ourselves from going into that automatic reactive mode?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right?
Right.
That's where the idea of intentionally interrupting our reactions comes in.
Interrupting, okay?
So when you feel that familiar trigger start to activate, the book suggests trying to create just a brief pause, take a deep breath. And if it's possible in that moment, maybe physically step away from the immediate situation for a minute until your emotions have a chance to settle down a bit.
Okay, step away.
That small amount of space, even just a few seconds, can allow your prefrontal cortex to come back online, so to speak. It gives you a wider range of response options beyond the initial impulse.
Well, what about those times when stepping away isn't really an option, like you're in public or something?
That's a great question, and the book addresses that too. It suggests things like focusing intently on your breath, maybe silently counting to 10, or even mentally rehearsing a calmer response you'd prefer to have. These techniques can create a similar internal pause, even if you can't physically leave.
That makes sense. Even those small internal shifts can maybe create just a little bit of distance. Now, another really important area the book gets into is our inner voice,
Yeah.
our self-talk.
Yes, this is so powerful. I mean, the way we internally talk to ourselves has such a profound impact on how we interact with the world, and especially with our children. The book poses this really thought-provoking question. Would you ever speak to a friend with the same harshness, the same judgment that you often direct towards yourself when you make a parenting mistake?
Oof. Yeah, that really hits home. I'd almost certainly be much more understanding and, forgiving with a friend in that situation.
Exactly. For so many parents, that inner voice can be incredibly critical, just constantly focused on blame and shame. But the book highlights the huge benefits of cultivating a kinder, more compassionate inner dialogue.
Right.
If, when you inevitably mess up as a parent, because we all do, your internal response is one of maybe understanding and a genuine curiosity about what happened rather
Yeah.
than immediate self-blame, well, that creates a much healthier space for learning and growth.
And that directly ties into how we then communicate with our kids, doesn't it? If we're constantly criticizing ourselves internally, it's almost inevitable that critical voice will spill over into how we talk to them.
Absolutely. Treating ourselves with that same level of kindness and understanding is really foundational to becoming a more patient, more effective parent.
Yeah.
And speaking of how we experience things internally, the book offers a really helpful perspective on our feelings, too.
Yes. Feelings are information, not enemies. I really like that reframing. It completely shifts how you approach those big emotions, doesn't it?
It really does. The idea is that all emotions are valid, they serve a purpose. They're often signaling important underlying needs that aren't being met.
Needs. Okay.
And the book reminds us that our feelings brain, that amygdala we talked about earlier, it can sometimes have an outsized reaction, right? It might interpret perceived threats as if they were life or death situations, even when objectively they aren't nearly that serious, like the broken vase.
So instead of trying to suppress or ignore these big emotions, which probably doesn't work anyway,
Right? Usually backfires.
how do we actually work with them?
So the first crucial step, according to the book, is simply acknowledging the feeling, just noticing it, naming it, without any judgment or shame attached.
Naming it.
Yeah. The example they give is like saying internally, "Hello, anger, I see you there." This seemingly simple act of acknowledgement actually helps to engage that prefrontal cortex again, the more rational part of our brain. It brings it back online to sort of observe the emotion rather than be swept away by it.
Oh,
So in that moment when your kid has just broken the vase, instead of immediately yelling, you maybe take a breath and think, okay, wow, I'm feeling really angry right now.
just noticing it.
Just noticing and naming. In the immediate aftermath of a strong emotional trigger, acknowledgement and acceptance of the feeling are key. The book suggests you can investigate the situation more fully, more thoughtfully, once everyone's had a chance to calm down. The priority in that initial moment is just to recognize and name what you're feeling without judgment.
Okay, so we're learning to manage our own emotional landscape better. That makes sense. But the book also puts a huge emphasis on the importance of connection with our kids. How do these two things fit together?
Yeah, the book really makes the case that building strong, healthy connections is like the primary goal of mindful parenting.
The goal.
Right. And one of the most effective ways to foster that connection is through active listening, specifically what they call reflective listening.
Reflective listening. Explain that a bit more. What does that actually look like in practice?
Okay, so it's about truly hearing what your child is communicating, both through their words, but also their body language, their tone, and then reflecting back to them your understanding of their feelings.
Okay.
And critically, doing this without imposing your own opinions or judgments or immediately jumping in to try and solve their problem.
Right, not fixing it straight away.
Exactly. The book uses that broken vase scenario again, which is quite helpful. So instead of launching into questions or accusations, why were you playing with that? Don't you know it's fragile? A parent practicing reflective listening might say something like, wow, you seem really upset that the vase broke, or maybe you look scared right now.
So you're essentially mirroring their emotion back to them,
Yeah.
helping them identify and maybe understand what they're feeling themselves.
Precisely. It's not about grilling them with questions or acting like a detective trying to assign blame. It's about creating a safe space where your child feels genuinely heard and understood.
A safe space.
Yeah. The aim is to help them develop their own emotional literacy, their own language for feelings, and eventually learn to manage those feelings themselves in healthy ways. This kind of empathetic listening, it builds a foundation of trust and cooperation. It's based on mutual understanding and growth rather than just, fear of punishment.
That makes so much sense. It's about fostering that deeper understanding, isn't it? Not just trying to control behavior in the heat of the moment. But what about the parent's own needs and feelings and all this?
Yeah.
The book does address that too, right? It's not all about the child.
Oh, absolutely. The book strongly emphasizes that parents' needs are just as valid and important as their children's. It's not selfish to have needs.
Right.
It encourages us parents to really become aware of our own needs, whether that's getting enough sleep or having some quiet alone time or needing a sense of order in our environment or, yes, even having our treasured possessions treated with care, like the vase.
Okay.
And it introduces the concept of iMessages as a constructive way to communicate those needs to our children.
Now, iMessages, I think most people have kind of heard of them, but the book really highlights the difference between doing them effectively and, well, doing them in a way that doesn't really work. What's the key distinction there?
Yeah, that's a really important point. The crucial difference, as the book lays out, is whether the I feel statement is genuinely expressing your own feeling or if it's actually a disguised you message, loaded up with blame and judgment.
The disguised you message.
Exactly. For instance, saying something like, I feel like you deliberately broke my vase just to make me angry. See, that starts with I feel, but it's really an accusation about the child's intentions.
Yeah, totally.
And that kind of I message is almost guaranteed to make the child feel defensive and just shut down communication.
Right, puts their walls straight up. So
Yeah.
what would be a more effective way to phrase that? Using a real iMessage.
Okay, so a true I message, according to the book, generally has 3 parts. First, a non-blaming description of the specific action or behavior. Second, a clear and truthful statement of the feeling that resulted in you because of that action. And third, a direct explanation of how that action affected you or what the consequence is for you.
Okay, 3 parts.
So in the vase example, a more effective I message might be something like, when the vase broke, that's the action. I felt really sad. That's the feeling because it was a special gift that I treasured. Now I need to carefully clean up all the broken glass so no one gets hurt. That's the effect on you.
I see. That's so much clearer and, much less likely to trigger defensiveness. It focuses on your own experience and the tangible consequences, rather than making assumptions about the child's motives or character.
Exactly. And the book also tackles something that's, well, just inevitable in any family dynamic conflict.
Right. Can't avoid it forever.
No, and conflict is presented not as something terrible to be avoided at all costs, but as a normal, natural part of living in close relationship with other people, especially when different needs feel like they're bumping up against each other.
Okay.
The book really stresses that there's no need to feel guilty or like a failure when conflict arises, or to try and suppress the feelings that come with it. Instead, it offers a really practical, sort of step-by-step strategy for navigating disagreements in a more mindful and collaborative way.
Okay, walk us through that. What are the key steps the book suggests for managing conflict constructively?
Okay, so the first, and maybe the most important step, is to ensure that everyone involved, both parent and child, has had a chance to calm down.
Calm down first. Got it.
Yeah, as we've discussed, rational problem solving is pretty much impossible when emotions are running high. Then, if there are any immediate safety concerns, like the broken glass from the vase, obviously those need to be addressed first.
Safety first. Makes sense.
Once everyone is calmer, the book suggests focusing on identifying the underlying needs of each person involved in the conflict.
The needs again.
Yes. So in the vase scenario, the parent might have a need for their belongings to be treated with respect, maybe a need for predictability. The child, maybe they had a need for attention, or perhaps they were just exploring their environment, a need for discovery, and misjudged the fragility of the object. You're trying to get past the surface issue to what's truly important for each person.
Okay, understand the needs. Then what?
Once those needs are on the table, the next step is to brainstorm potential solutions together. And the book emphasizes creating a space where all ideas are welcome at this stage, like no bad ideas during brainstorming.
Okay, open brainstorming.
Encourage your child to actively participate in coming up with possible ways to meet everyone's needs. After you've got a few options, you evaluate those ideas together. You choose one that seems like it addresses everyone's needs as effectively as possible.
Collaboratively.
Yes. Then, create a clear plan of action based on that chosen solution. And finally, and this is important, make sure to check in with each other afterward, just to ensure that everyone feels heard, respected, and that their needs have been considered in the solution.
That sounds like a really empowering approach. It's focused on finding solutions that work for the whole family, isn't it?
Yeah.
Rather than just, a parent imposing a top-down decision or punishment.
Exactly. It fosters cooperation. And the book concludes by really emphasizing the significance of those small, everyday moments of positive connection, too. It's not all about conflict management.
Right, the day-to-day stuff.
Absolutely. While learning to navigate conflict effectively is crucial, the book reminds us that building strong, resilient family relationships is also built on those positive, everyday interactions. Simple things like positive physical touch hugs, cuddles, a hand on the shoulder, dedicating even short periods to just play together without distractions, even involving children in shared responsibilities around the house, like chores done together. These things can significantly strengthen those bonds of connection.
So it's not just about minimizing the negative interaction.
No.
It's actively cultivating the positive ones.
Exactly. And they make the important point that even boundaries, which can sometimes be a source of conflict, right?
Yeah, definitely.
They're actually vital for creating a secure and connected relationship when they're established and maintained with understanding and respect. And when conflicts do arise around those boundaries, navigating them with mindfulness and that collaborative spirit we talked about can actually deepen trust and understanding within the family.
Huh. So even boundary conflicts can be strengthening, if handled well.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
The overall message is that this is an ongoing process, a continuous practice that yields really significant long-term rewards for everyone involved.
Okay. So as we bring this deep dive to a close, what are the absolute key takeaways you'd want listeners to hold on to from raising mindful and connected humans?
Well, I think the core principles really center around cultivating mindfulness, first for ourselves as the bedrock for regulating our own emotional responses, then developing a deeper understanding of our personal triggers, but with self-compassion, not blame.
Right, self-compassion.
Recognizing that our feelings, even the difficult ones, provide valuable information about our needs. And then for connecting with our kids, it's practicing that reflective listening, communicating our own needs effectively, using genuine I messages, and navigating disagreements collaboratively, aiming to meet everyone's needs. And all of this is supported by the power of those small, positive, everyday interactions that weave the fabric of strong family relationships.
And the overarching message, it really seems to be one of genuine hope, right? That even just the conscious effort, the act of trying to become a more mindful and connected parent is a really significant step in a positive direction.
Exactly. The book beautifully emphasizes that. Even small, consistent efforts in these areas can lead to truly meaningful and lasting change over time. It's absolutely not about achieving some impossible ideal of perfection. It's much more about embracing the journey of growth and progress for both you and your child.
So for you, our listener, maybe take a moment now or later today to reflect on one recent interaction you had with your child, which is one small, mindful practice that resonated with you today that you could consciously try implementing.
Just one small thing.
Yeah, maybe it's simply taking one deep breath before you respond the next time you feel triggered. Or perhaps it's focusing on really listening to understand your child's feelings for just a few minutes without immediately jumping in with solutions or judgments. Just observe, without any pressure or self-criticism, what happens. It's a starting point, isn't it? And every little bit of mindful awareness you bring to your parenting can make a real difference, both in your reactions and in the strength of your connection with your child.